Partitioning of the primitive atrium begins at the end of the 4th week. A sickle-shaped or crescentic-shaped septum appears from the roof of the primitive atrium and grows toward the fused endocardial cushion. This is septum primum. The two limbs of septum primum extend toward the endocardial cushions in the atrioventricular canal. As the leading edge and the trailing edge fuse with the endocardial cushions, there is a foramen left between the lower rim of the septum primum as the endocardial cushions, named as foramen primum. Here, the foramen primum serves as a shunt, enabling oxygenated blood to pass from the right to the left atrium and then into the systematic circulation. With the further growth of septum primum, the foramen primum becomes progressively smaller and smaller, ultimately disappears as the septum primum fills with the endocardial cushion. Interestingly, just before the foramen primum disappears, perforations appear in the upper part of the septum primum. As the septum primum fuses with endocardial cushions, the perforations fuse with each other as they form another foramen. This is foramen secundum. The foramen secundum ensures a continuous flow of the oxygenated blood from the right to the left atrium. During the 5th week, immediately to the right of the septum primum, a thick, rigid, muscular, crescentic-shaped septum grows from the ventral cranial wall of the atrium, gradually overgrows the foramen secundum and continues to grow towards the endocardial cushion. As the anterior and the posterior limb fuse with the endocardial cushion, the septum secundum stops growing. Another foramen is left between the free edge of septum secundum and the endocardial cushion, named as foramen ovale. From foramen ovale, we can't see the foramen secundum. They don't overlap. Later, the upper part of the septum primum, just above the foramen secundum, gradually disappears. The remaining lower part becomes the valve of the foramen ovale. Before birth, the pressure in the right atrium is higher than the pressure in the left atrium, and because the pulmonary circulation is not established. The foramen ovale allows most of the oxygenated blood from the inferior vena cava to pass directly into the left atrium. But the foramen ovale doesn't allow the venous blood from the pulmonary veins to pass into the right atrium, because the remaining of the septum primum is pressed tightly against the septum secundum. The foramen ovale is closed tightly. If foramen ovale remains open after 1 year, this is congenital heart disease called atrial septal defect. It's a common congenital heart anomaly and occurs more frequently in females than in males. And here shows more perforations in the valve of the foramen ovale during the formation of the foramen secundum, causing 2 or more shunts between the right and left atrium. And here shows excessive resorption of the septum primum, causing large foramen secundum overlapping with the foramen ovale. And this picture shows inadequate development of the septum secundum, causing a large foramen ovale, overlapping with the foramen secundum. If above-mentioned 2 causes persist at the same time, a large foramen secundum and a large foramen ovale will form, causing a large shunt between the right and left atrium. And this picture shows inadequate development of the endocardial cushion, causing a small atrial septal defect near the endocardial cushion. Surgery is needed to close the atrial septal defect. Previously, thoracotomy is needed. In recent years, the transcatheter occlusion is used to atrial septal defect. Due to the less invasive approach, transcatheter techniques have replaced thoracotomy as a standard procedure for atrial septal defect. The occluder is a self-expanding nitinol mesh device and is designated to be introduced in a minimal invasive fashion through a catheter. When the occluder is folded, it's very small. The occluder is folded up until the catheter arrives at the site of the defect in the heart. Once in place, the occluder is unfolded on both sides of the defect, so that the pressure from the both atria keeps it in place. Well, this is the partitioning of the primitive atrium and the clinical correlations. Now, share one case. During an autopsy of a 72-year-old man who died from chronic heart failure, it was observed that his heart was very large, and the pulmonary artery and its main branches were dilated. Opening the heart revealed a very large atrial septal defect. What type of atrial septal defect was probably present? Where would the defect likely be located? Explain why the pulmonary artery and its main branches were dilated. Why might this have not been diagnosed earlier? Please think about it carefully. Leave your comments on the discussion area. Thank you.